So I was very excited to be able to be here today with Jerome in particular. I've just noticed that somehow we kind of get the same Sundays a lot. It's exciting, and I feel paired up and matched. And your song, we didn't pre-plan that, but it actually feels really perfect for what I want to talk about today. Because how many of us have been in a phase like this where we're watching a beautiful sunset, we're listening to this amazing song, we're having this grand experience. We're seeing that it's a beautiful day, finally, and we're chipper. We're in this positive mood. And we say to the person, "Isn't it a wonderful day? Isn't this a beautiful experience?" And the person next to us is like, "Meh," right? It just burst our bubble. It's just like this sort of fount of negativity that can sometimes happen when we are of the opinion that the day is a certain way. And then we get sort of this wellspring of opposing belief. We can get that not just about our day, we can get it about what we're doing with our lives. How many of us have told our parents, "I want to be an artist," and with enthusiasm, with excitement, only to have this, differences of opinion, differences of belief. So, it being a beautiful day, the kind of day we like to go to the park, sit on a bench perhaps. I like to run around the park. I'm not that still usually, so I like to jog around the park. But you jog around the park and you see people sitting on benches. And I read the story about a mean man. That's not my term. That's what the storyteller called him. A mean and stingy old man sitting on a park bench one day. And he was sitting right next to what was called a meager man. A meager man who was kind of disheveled in his clothing. And the mean man came from a lot of outer wealth. So he was dressed to a T, just feeling sharp about who he was. And then the man next to him was kind of dressed with holes in his clothes, etc. So the mean man looks over and sees, there are birds chirping, right? It's spring, there are birds chirping. And he's like, "Did you see that robin?" He tells the meager man, "Did you see that robin? Fly down and pick up that worm and then munch on it and then go fly back up to its nest and then spit it out and feed it to its babies. Did you see that?" He's like, life is like that, he tells the meager man. Life is just like that, where it's like it eats you up and it just spits you out, kind of, he says. And then the meager man looks over, nods gently, and says, maybe. He said, or maybe the mother robin was chewing on the worm and actually eating it in order to make sure that it was good, chewing on it to make sure it wasn't a bad worm, a nasty worm, a poisoned worm, and then even maybe took a little bit in to make sure it was okay for her babies. And so maybe what she was doing was protecting her children and actually braving the wild in order to forage for this food in the first place. The meager man replied. And there was a long pause. And the mean man's face gently started to soften. And it began to light up like the dawn. And in this moment, he realized who the wealthier man really was. Because for all his outer riches, this mean man had a view, an opinion, a belief about life that was filled with lack and limitation, the sense of the world. But in this moment, truth dawned on him, and he reached over, and he embraced, and he gave thanks to this other man. Now, talking about differences in belief, in what we believe about the nature of reality, whether we have to fend and fight and forage, whether other people are acting out of only self-interest or out of love, these beliefs, if we look at ourselves, if I look at myself and I look at my own history, I'm aware of the fact that, at least hopefully, right, all of this is true of all of us, that the beliefs that I held about the world when I was 16, that they're different. If I were to make a list, it would be a pretty long list of all the beliefs I held when I was 16. Oh, I knew everything then, right? Back then, they would be different from the list of opinions and beliefs that I held when I was 25. And different from the beliefs that I held when I was 40. And on and on. I hope, right? We'd hope that they're different over time. And most of us are aware of this, that I've changed throughout my history. What I believe has changed. But even with this intellectual awareness, on an everyday basis, when I wake up in the morning, I tend to believe that whatever I believe today is right and true, right? I have ideas about what's worse and better. For instance, chocolate ice cream is better than vanilla ice cream, in my view, right? I didn't always feel that way, but I do today. And even green tea ice cream, if you've never tried that, I think is the best. So I have these views, right? And so fortunately, not all of our views have substantial impact in our lives, right? But ironically, it's often the views we hold that can have the biggest impact that we can maybe tend to cling to the most. And so I want to take a look at how we hold what we believe and whether and when we're willing to be open to something new. For many of us, the willingness to believe something different comes from a tragedy. For instance, those of us who hit bottom and face addiction hear the term, "my stinking thinking got me here," and we realize that our life paradigm, we thought we were so smart, we thought we knew how to make our lives work, and when we realized that after all of this finagling of life, we weren't able to do it. So it creates a certain humility that opens us up to the possibility of a new thought, right? And for others of us, you read about these amazing parents who might have come from traditional backgrounds where homosexuality was just not okay. You know, from religious backgrounds where that's what they were taught. But in the face of having a child or a grandchild who is of that sexual orientation, who identifies as such, is faced with that question, right? And the beauty of the capacity of a person to change because love opens up the heart and the mind in a way that says, I am willing to believe something different now from what I was raised and taught to believe. So there are big events, right? There's even the idea that most of us may have, at some point in our lives, placed a lot of our security in our own bank accounts. I remember in the year 2008 living in California when the market collapsed. And the way that people placed this belief of their experience and their sense of security in this outer thing got shattered, right? And so, actually, no, maybe my life paradigm is that if I just work hard and stash my money away, that I will be okay, get shattered. And I start to open myself up to a different belief. So today, I want to focus on not just the capacity that we all just naturally have to change our minds about something, but to ask ourselves, in the midst of an event, a circumstance that would have us sort of question what it is we do believe. Is the world wonderful or not? Is it mean and miserly, or is it generous and abundant? What do we believe? That the first step, one option, is the way in which we might be open to other people. Meaning open to this idea that, as much as I have this thing, I like chocolate ice cream, I like green tea ice cream, but really, if I'm super honest with myself, what I like more than anything is being right. I just love it when people say you're right, Nhien, right? And I could see how my personal identity is deeply enmeshed with this. But so long as it is, I'm actually inhibiting my capacity for entertaining a diversity of perspective and seeing a greater wholeness in the world. And so if I can say that my worth and my value is not attached to being right, then I'm allowed to open. Because if my value is attached to being right, then I'm stuck, right? So if I can just sort of gently rest in what unity teaches as a core principle, which is you are a child of God, an expression of the divine, and therefore innately whole, worthy, and perfect, intrinsically, not because of something you believe or don't believe. That's why we can hold the diversity that we do, love everyone in the way that we do, be open to embracing the breadth of diversity, because we don't believe that you have to believe that Jesus died for your sins. You don't have to believe a certain thing for you to be worthy. If we just know that, that enables us to step into today, this moment of my life, and say, I have these ideas. I'm aware that in my past, I've let go of some of these ideas, so I can enter the moment spaciously and undefended. And in this moment, I can either live in a way in which I'm aware of the peace and blessing and joy of this moment, or I can live with tapes that might tell me, no, either, so these might be tapes about the other person. These people, right? The people at work. Oh, everybody at work is like this, right? The people who live on that side of truth are like this. That I might have beliefs that attest to lack and limitation that are different from the beliefs that we teach and celebrate every week, the beliefs in unity and wholeness and oneness. That can be a clue for me that if I'm telling a story, it's because of my age I can't do this, I can't have that kind of job, it's because of the way I look that I can't. These beliefs in lack and limitation, we then become willing and open to let them budge. We make space for them to kind of shift around a little bit just by virtue of that openness. And I want to say that I personally believe that we don't actually change our own mind. Rather, we become willing to change. And then through grace, a new thought dawns on us. I only learned recently, talking about grace, that the Greyhound ship that was sailing in the 1700s was sailing through this big storm. And these folks were 11 days out in a storm. This is a true story. And they were trying to pump the water out of the boat and pretty much assured that the boat was going to sink. Experience, science, all these things would tell you that the boat is going to sink. On that boat was a man named John Newton. And this man had been a sailor since he was 11 years old. And so, there's a reputation among sailors that there's a lot of debauchery and profanity and all this. And even among sailors, this guy, John Newton, was known for being particularly profane. This is a true story. This man was also a slave trader. And so back then in the 1700s, this is kind of what he did, and this is the life that he led. Well, in this moment, he decided that all of this idea about there not being a God, he decided in a moment, which often happens in a crisis, I'm going to pray. And so he prayed, and he had a moment of faith dawning on him. And ultimately, we know about the story because the ship was saved. And later on, this man became a minister and wrote the song, Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. And so we understand more the line, I was blind, but now I see. When I learned this story, I thought, oh my goodness, every thought I hold, every belief I hold of lack and limitation and separation is a way in which I am blind to truth. And so it's not so much about being open to someone else's view instead of mine. The deeper spiritual journey is opening up to the mind of God. Einstein said, I want to know the thoughts of God. The rest are mere details. The thoughts of God. So here in Unity, when we talk about God, it's so important to remember that we believe that life is consciousness, pure consciousness, infinite intelligence available at the point of view. Within your own being is this truth, is this deep knowing. But what happens is we get layered on with the ideas of the world, with our experience that says, hey, my family was mean to me. Or the people in my life in the early years were selfish, and therefore this is the way the world is. And we get layered on with these stories about otherness and about ourselves. But if we're willing, just willing and open, we don't have to make the change ourselves. In fact, if we try to make the change ourselves, our conscious mind is the one control. I'm going to have this new thought over here, as opposed to the idea that I'm going to open my mind to truth. And that's why here in Unity, we emphasize prayer and meditation so much. Because otherwise, it's just the pure psychology of us trying to willpower our way into a different knowing. But if instead we are willing to let go of what we think we know on a daily basis, keep that attitude of openness on a daily basis, and go into that silence in which, in every moment of the silence, if you're anything like me, then it is a constant, it's like a storm of thoughts, right? These thoughts are saying in my mind, you sitting here, Nhien, is not as useful as going out and actually getting something done, right? This is, someone's calling you right now. That's actually more important than this time. And so my mind has these old beliefs about the way that I'm going to get my life to work for me. But what if I was willing to test something out and do it on a regular basis? And what if I was willing to see that in each time, it's not just about sitting in the silence, it's about being schooled in divine mind. That in this time, this wealth of divine ideas, of truth, not only becomes a belief in my mind, but becomes a knowing in my heart and in my body amazing grace, a way that is felt so that as I move forward in the world, I would have such faith and trust that when something seems to be in opposition to that, I now don't assume I'm right. If I'm like, oh, these people are against me. They're meanies, They're against me. If I have that thought, I now question my thought. Instead of going, well, see, and here's all the evidence that I can amass. And how do I allow a revelation to occur within me? Because it's still hard, right? Just because I'm willing to question it doesn't mean I don't still feel as if, right, they're against me or they're not supporting me. That for me, the invitation within unity is to go within into the silence in an act of deep faith and deep trust that there is indeed a benevolence to this universe. That I may not know it or see it right now, but if I can just remember how there are things that I know now that I couldn't have fathomed in my childhood, that maybe I could have this leap of faith that enables me to become still and surrender to this silence within me. I mean, Charles Fillmore, co-founder of the Unity movement, always emphasized, I reserve the right to change my mind. And yet, most of us spend our time defending our own mind, even defending it against love and truth and beauty, for fear, wow, I might be disappointed, for fear, I'm a skeptic, like I don't want to be like a fool. But what if, instead of defending my own mind, I surrendered it on a daily basis to the silence? And I wish I could tell you what you would come to know. But for me, all I can do is point toward the process and say, you know what? I don't have the truth that is yours. But that truth, I believe, can be found. The truth for your life. The truth for what can be real for you and what can be good and what can be loving and what can be the best choice in this moment for you. I can't tell you that. But I feel that there is a process that 100 years of the Unity teachings support and have demonstrated to be true, that if we're willing to surrender what we think we know, then we get schooled by divine mind in the beauty that is life. And so my invitation is to join me now in engaging in a time of meditation. From this perspective, what if you just took, not everything you believe, what if you just took one thought that you know you've been holding, that you know testifies to lack or limitation or separation, about yourself from goodness, or about another person and their worth and their intrinsic rightness to be. If you can take one thought and surrender it to the silence today or maybe this week. So let's begin here now in a time of meditation.